topic is on the new normal in financing and capital raising to accelerate business growth. We will be covering key topics such as exploring trends in capital raising to fund international growth, developing fundraising strategies for gradual versus aggressive business growth, and what should SMEs and startups look out for, and understanding the impact of ICOs and cryptocurrency in the future of investment and rapid business growth. We'd like to welcome our speaker, Ms. Rebecca Wu, Vice Chair of the Board from Bansi, Singapore. She's born and raised in Singapore. Rebecca has more than 20 years of investing and business experience, spanning across government, investment institutions, and family offices. Rebecca graduated from the UK and US and also has the CFA and CAIA professional designations. With her education and experience, Rebecca also actively contributes to the broader investment and business community by volunteering at various organizations such as Bansi as a vice chair of the board, Singapore Institute of Directors as the committee member for diversity and international relations. Rebecca is passionate about supporting entrepreneurs and diversity in companies. Let's put our hands together and welcome Ms. Rebecca Wu on screen. Hi everyone, let's welcome Rebecca Wu here, and nice to meet you today, Rebecca. And since you are really an experienced industry leader in the space of capital raising, I have a few questions for you today. I mean, we have a mix of SME business owners as well as entrepreneurs here. First of all, we'd like to ask you, what are some of the trends in today's time, right? And what are some of the trends in capital raising to fund international growth for businesses?
No, thank you, Renee. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to be able to support your event. I'm so glad that there are so many participants who are looking to continue to grow their business. So Renee, as you have mentioned, I have about 20 years of international business experience. I'm currently the vice chair on the board of Bansi, which actually is a non-profit angel investment group. So to your question about fundraising or capital raising for small medium enterprises, I think the first and foremost is, I think we are very blessed to be in Singapore. I think the government is extremely supportive of all entrepreneurs and small businesses and businesses that want to springboard internationally. So I always encourage companies as a start to see if they can get the relevant government support through the different agencies as they continue to grow their business plan. So that's one channel, which actually gives a lot of validation as well to their business model, to their business opportunities. That's one angle. The second is obviously, going to, some of the local banks who have a very strong SME practice. And why I say that is because when you go to the banks, a lot of times when they give financing, it's in terms of loans or credit lines, which will avoid, the entrepreneur from diluting their own shareholding and equity stake in their business. So whether it's getting a government grant or government support or going to a local bank, that already protects your long-term interests, right? So that's a second channel. And third, obviously, would be going to all the private investors, the different venture capital funds, the different private equity funds, the different SME, funds out there who are actively looking for good businesses and, of course, good entrepreneurs to back and to work together to grow the business for the long term.
Right, and for different type of businesses, and of course, there's a difference between the SMEs and the startups, right? Their ways of growing the business is very different. Like the unicorns of today would go through a very aggressive sort of business growth, whereas the SME will go through a more gradual growth, and therefore, the support that they want to seek and funding, of course, would be quite different. But what are some of the tips, that you could share with us, and what should SMEs and startups look out for? What are the key consideration factors they should look out for in growing the difference between the startup and the SME? Yeah, or do you think it's the same? Yeah.
No, I think, yeah, I actually, that's a great question, Renee. I really think it's a bit of a labeling situation. Really, ultimately, it's down to your business model, right? And what your company is good at, right? So if you're an education company, are you a startup? Are you an SME? I think you are possibly both, right? So, to your point about, is the fundraising going to be different? I think ultimately all investors, including even the banks to the government, are looking for good businesses to support, right? Of course, perhaps a startup, which is a technology startup, may have a very different growth path, a very different trajectory compared to perhaps someone that's in a more traditional business. But it doesn't mean that someone that's in the traditional business, let's say in F&B, will not be a good business. It can also still be a very strong growing business, but perhaps not at the growth rate that perhaps a venture capitalist might be looking for. So I really think there's no right or wrong or one way that's the best way. I think it boils down so much to the nature of the business, the sector at that point in time, and of course the vision and the ambition of the management team.
And what's your thought about, you mentioned about government support, local banks, private investors and things like that. And there are other platforms like peer-to-peer platforms, peer lending platforms and crowdfunding platforms. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think this is something that SMEs should even consider? Or do you think this is something that is good for startups maybe?
I think, again, that's a great question. I do see a lot of online funding platforms, and some of them are focused on SMEs, which means maybe small middle enterprises. They're a little bit in the traditional business. They're looking for invoice financing. They're looking for just a growth capital. They're looking for bridge for a project financing. So I do think that there are platforms out there that offer this very valuable service, that it's fairly efficient and fairly affordable, because if you go and get a government grant or a loan from a bank, sometimes the process can be quite long, and that may not meet your needs if you're looking for quick financing at a project level. So there are platforms out there who do well, and I really support them. And I myself, and I look at those platforms, I subscribe to it, I look at some of the opportunities. I think in terms of P2P fundraising platforms, there are other platforms that focus a little bit more on startups, right? So they will support Bunsey specifically support a lot of very early startups, right? Enabling startups to come and pitch, present to potential investors, even if it's just an idea or concept off the table. So I think there are groups like these that are very supportive of new companies or new concepts. So I would say all of these platforms are actually good for the ecosystem, and all of them offer a different value add. So it depends on what is suitable for your company at that point in time.
And with the pandemic, we see a lot of traditional businesses trying to pivot, and different businesses utilize technology differently or innovate differently. Right. What are some of the ways you think businesses can increase their valuation of the business, especially for traditional business? Some went to pivot, some would implement technology to increase productivity and whatnot. How do you think one's business could, increase their valuation during this difficult period? Yeah.
No, I think, again, that's a great question. I think really, I think COVID or this pandemic situation cuts both ways. It's actually been great for some businesses. It's been amazing. I know of this cleaning supplies company, very traditional SME, that has done phenomenally well. That, literally sales has gone 10 times through the roof. They can't even meet supply. I mean, they can't even meet the demand. So I think it again, in every crisis, there's an opportunity. So it depends on where you're positioning. I think for some businesses, which may be in areas that let's use F&B again, right, where you may feel that given this pandemic, there's no one's coming out. A lot of traditional F&B, including the hawker centers, have pivoted to online ordering, online delivery, even setting up their own e-shop. So to me, that is also a good trend, which means the whole digitizing trend, which is here to stay, such that even traditional businesses, which are very focused on brick and mortar, whether it's F&B, retail, to even something like I said, cleaning supplies, can actually benefit from this pandemic by pivoting themselves to meet customers' needs, right, in a different way, right? So I think I always think with every a change in the external environment or external shocks like these, you will get new champions and new companies that will come up and be very successful. Again, that cleaning supplies company.
Right, fantastic. Right, so these days we talk about digital currencies, right? You go to shops, as you talk about retail, we stop, giving cash. You don't have to bring cash out, right? You just bring our phones and then we pay with whatever, right, apps that we have. And let's talk about the impact of digital currency, a cryptocurrency, in the future of investment and rapid business growth. Do you think it is the wave that traditional businesses should follow, go digital in terms of payment? Yeah, what do you think?
Mm-hmm. No, I do think that digitization is here to stay in just what form and what might be relevant for your business. So again, I use the most traditional businesses like the hawker centers and the hawkers, who are also transitioning now to the fact that they used to be only a pure cash business. But if you go to walk into any market central, hawker centers, you see that 80% of the hawkers there are now using QR codes payment. They don't want to deal with your cash. They're so busy cooking. They're like, oh, just pay and scan the code. So I professionally and personally like it. I do think it's a great development and change, right? That that even our most traditional old uncle and auntie are now using digital payment methods, right, for their business. So I think digitization, digital payments, different digital modes is here to stay. Specifically for cryptocurrency, that's a little bit different, right? It's a form of a currency, right? I mean, we all use the Sing dollar, the US dollar, the Australian dollar, but crypto, whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum, it's a different system altogether. I myself and not fully convinced that it's going to be permanent. I do think that it is here to stay somewhat in some form, but how permanent can it get without being regulated? I do think that's a question mark. So it is a little bit on the early stage side, right, for crypto perspective, although crypto actually has been around. But I would just say, putting crypto aside, digital payments in its different channels and different modes are just here to stay.
And what is your thought about startups pursuing ICOs? What do you think that is, how do you think that can impact businesses? Yeah.
ICOs was very hot about 5 years ago when cryptocurrency came out. There were a lot of ICOs in the market, all trying to raise capital as a different form. Most recently it was not ICOs but SPACs, reverse mergers and all that. So you always get all sorts of trends now and then in the financial markets. So I always tell companies that not to get caught up in noise, but to really look at systems, opportunities that are relevant for your specific company, right? If you want to chase the ICO, is ICO the best mode for your company, right? And what kind of coin, and it takes a lot of effort anyway to do an ICO as well. If you want to do a SPAC, are you big enough? Are you suitable? Are you in the right sector? So I do think that, again, there are many solutions out there. Whether ICOs will continue to, be very trendy as it was, I think 5-6 years ago. I think that remains to be seen.
And what do you think is the wave moving forward, right? What is the new digital wave in the future? What do you think we'll be looking at? And these days you will see that there is a sudden rise of certain startups and then a sudden collapse. It's quite quick, right? In a matter of a few years. And then you've got traditional businesses that have been struggling to do well, and then after some time, it's a gradual process, but startups is much faster. What do you think is the future for businesses? I mean, what kind of model would be the most sustainable one? Yeah.
So ultimately, if you want to build a sustainable business, it's all about making the right revenues and build sustainable profits. To me, there's no mystery to that, right? That has never changed from day one. The most successful businesses out there, they generate real returns, cash on cash. And again, I go back to the cleaning supplies company. Is a very down to earth business. It's a real business. they bring in cleaning supplies and they sell cleaning supplies, so, it's a very boring business, but it makes a really good money, especially during the pandemic, right? So I think, ultimately entrepreneurs should look into the real viability of the business model and not look at chasing valuation or fundraising. So I think you should be in the business of running a business and you're not in the business of fundraising.
Yeah. Fantastic. Right. So do you think COVID has changed investors' perspective? And what do you think, is the trend these days? And what are some of the industries that investors are most interested in?
No, I think investors are very interested in companies that are able to pivot and to be digital and to make use of, the fact that the pandemic will be here to stay, the ability to communicate across borders and provide value, added services that meet the needs of the consumers at this point in time. So I think if it's just a brick and mortar business sitting at a corner, that might be very challenging because, traffic continues to be restricted, continues to be challenging. So I think investors will look at companies that are able to pivot, able to provide solutions that, whatever their customer base needs. So I think even the best F&B companies, they have pivoted to using central kitchens, focusing on delivery only. So there are interesting models that actually have come up, even for some brands that, you even during this time, you've seen new brands coming up with innovative products, food products, innovative delivery models, innovative ordering models where everything gets through the phone, through an app, for example. They don't even need to order through the cashier or order through a waitress, So I think all these innovative models will be here to stay, and that's a good thing out of this pandemic.
And just yesterday, the government has announced, or not too long ago, the government has announced an increase in funding in the areas of AI as well, right? What are some of the things that you think, we should build our talent pool? What are the areas in which we should be grooming the talent here? Which areas? Is it just, what's trending, AI, cybersecurity and whatnot, but, what's your thought about that on whether we have such talent in the first place, and how can we groom people who are successful in business and yet be knowledgeable about such areas? Yeah.
Okay. No, I think, as we continue to, develop into a technology equipped economy, I think it's always good that everyone comes with basic technological skills. I think that's almost a given, right? And of course, whether you can go deeper into coding, specific AI, I think that depends on your own individual interests and capability, and but I do think that increasingly, as part of a technology enabled economy, everyone needs to be familiar, be comfortable, be able to use a technology. Like I said, even the oldest hawker is now able to take orders over the phone and handle the tablet of Foodpanda. I think that would have been inconceivable without the pandemic, because now they're forced to do it and they realize they can do it.
For some of these successful companies that you have engaged with, how do they overcome adversity during this period to grow and beyond, just their local region? What helped them to kind of leapfrog and grow and go global?
No, I think, that it's, that really is down back to, what business are they offering, and can that be a cross-border business, right? Some businesses are clearly quite local, right? F&B, right? And I think with travel and opportunity for businesses to go out, yes, you can perhaps bring your brand, do franchising. So I don't think that will change once the borders open. I think it's just particularly this 2 years is a little bit challenging to really actively expand overseas. But if you do expand overseas successfully, I think a lot of it is done digitally and online. And I think increasingly, businesses around the world are becoming more and more comfortable conducting business online.
Right, just like Zoom, right? We sell.
Yes, I think that's become the new norm. I think everyone is much more comfortable.
Yes, all right. So maybe let's take the opportunity to get the questions from the floor. And this is the Q&A segment. Please feel free to type in your questions and we'll head towards the Q&A session.